There are countless books that promise transformation, books that promise clarity, books that promise success, discipline, focus, and peace. And yet, most people read them, feel inspired for a few days, and then quietly return to the same patterns. Not because they are weak, not because they lack intelligence, but because most transformation systems start from the wrong place. They start from the mind. This book does not, because real change does not begin with ideas. It begins with structure, with discipline, with the body. Long before motivation, long before positive thinking, long before vision boards and affirmations, human beings understood something we have largely forgotten: that the body is not just something you have, it is something you train to shape the mind. This audiobook is not here to entertain you, and it is not here to overwhelm you with information. It is here to reintroduce you to control. Not control over others, not control over life, but control over yourself. Because without that, no strategy works, no goal lasts, no success stays. Most people live in reaction. They wake up tired. Their breath is shallow, their posture is collapsed, their attention is scattered, and then they wonder why discipline feels impossible. They wonder why focus disappears, why anxiety feels constant, why motivation comes and goes like weather. But the truth is simpler than we like to admit. A disorganized body produces a disorganized mind. You cannot think your way out of chaos if your nervous system lives inside it. This is why ancient systems of self-mastery never began with mindset. They began with how you sit, how you breathe, how you hold yourself in stillness. Because stillness is not the absence of movement, it is the presence of control. This audiobook is inspired by principles that were never meant for casual curiosity. They were designed for people who were serious about transformation. Not quick results, not hacks, not shortcuts, but irreversible change. Change that becomes part of who you are. You will not be asked to believe anything blindly. You will not be asked to adopt beliefs, identities, or philosophies. Instead, you will be invited to experience something rare in the modern world: order. Order in the body, order in the breath, order in attention. From that, clarity emerges naturally. One of the biggest lies of modern self-development is that effort equals progress. It doesn't. Unstructured effort creates burnout. Forced discipline creates rebellion. Aggressive control creates collapse. True mastery is quiet, almost invisible. It feels less like force and more like alignment. This is why people who truly possess control rarely talk about it. You can see it in how they move, how they pause before speaking, how their presence calms a room instead of demanding attention. That kind of control cannot be faked. It is trained. As you listen to this audiobook, something important is required from you. Not belief, not agreement, but patience. Some ideas here will feel slow. Some concepts will feel subtle. That is intentional, because the deeper something goes, the quieter it becomes. If you are looking for motivation spikes, this is not for you. But if you are looking for stability, for discipline that doesn't collapse, for focus that doesn't depend on mood, then you are exactly where you need to be. Across the chapters that follow, we will explore how physical stillness trains mental stability, why breath is the bridge between stress and control, how attention behaves like energy, why containment matters more than intensity, and how effort eventually gives way to effortlessness. Not as theories, but as lived principles. Each chapter builds on the previous one, not intellectually, structurally, like laying stones for a foundation. You do not need to rush. This audiobook is designed to be listened to slowly, repeatedly. Some chapters may make more sense the second time. Others will click weeks later in moments of silence. That is how real systems work. They don't impress you immediately, they restructure you quietly. So before we begin, take a moment. Not to relax, not to clear your mind, just to notice. How are you sitting right now? How is your breath? Where is your attention resting? These are not small details. They are the starting point of everything that follows. Because transformation does not begin with desire, it begins with position. And from this point forward, we begin not by thinking differently, but by standing differently inside ourselves.
Chapter 1. The Forgotten Intelligence of the Body. Modern culture teaches us a very specific lie. It tells us that intelligence lives only in the mind, that success is a result of thinking harder, planning better, strategizing more. And so people spend their lives upgrading information while their lives remain unchanged. Because intelligence does not begin in thought, it begins in regulation. Long before a person can manage money, lead others, or sustain success, they must first be able to manage themselves. And self-management does not start in the brain, it starts in the body. The body has its own form of intelligence, not emotional, not intellectual, but biological wisdom. It knows how to balance, how to conserve energy, how to recover, how to adapt. When this intelligence is ignored, something predictable happens. You become mentally ambitious, but physically chaotic. You want growth, but your system is unstable. This is why so many people want success, but cannot hold it when it arrives. They burn out. They self-sabotage. They lose focus at the exact moment consistency is required, not because they lack desire, but because their internal structure cannot support expansion. Think of success like weight. If you add weight to a weak structure, it doesn't elevate it, it collapses it. Money works the same way. More income does not create discipline, it exposes the lack of it. More opportunity does not create clarity, it magnifies disorder. This is why some people earn more and feel poorer, work harder and feel emptier, achieve more and feel less stable. Their external life grew faster than their internal capacity. Ancient systems understood this clearly. They never asked, "How do I achieve more?" They asked, "How do I become stable enough to handle more?" That stability was trained physically, through stillness, through posture, through breath, because a body that cannot remain still cannot sustain attention, and a mind that cannot sustain attention cannot create lasting value. Look at how most people work today. They sit for hours with collapsed posture. Their breathing is shallow. Their nervous system is overstimulated. Then they wonder why focus feels painful, why they need caffeine, pressure, or deadlines just to function. But focus is not a motivational problem. It is a physiological state. A regulated body produces clear attention. A dysregulated body produces urgency, anxiety, and distraction. No mindset technique can override that for long. Here is where discipline is misunderstood. Discipline is often framed as force, forcing yourself to wake up, forcing productivity, forcing consistency. But forced discipline always breaks. True discipline is structural. It is the result of a body that knows how to hold form without tension. That kind of discipline feels calm, almost boring, and yet unstoppable. This is the discipline that builds wealth slowly but permanently, that compounds effort instead of exhausting it. Notice the pattern among people who succeed long term. They are not always the smartest, they are not always the fastest, but they are regulated. They know when to push, when to stop, when to wait. They don't leak energy everywhere. This is not personality, it is training. The body teaches patience naturally. You cannot rush posture. You cannot force stillness. You cannot cheat breath. The body responds only to consistency. This is why practices that train the body also train patience, restraint, and long-term thinking. These qualities later appear as better financial decisions, emotional control under pressure, strategic thinking instead of impulsive action, the ability to delay gratification, all pillars of real success. When people say, "I know what I should do, but I don't do it," that is not a knowledge problem. It is a capacity problem. Their system cannot hold the tension between desire and action. The body collapses before the plan can stabilize. This audiobook begins by fixing that, not with force, not with motivation, but with structure. As we move forward, you will notice something important. We are not chasing peak performance, we are building baseline stability. Because peak performance is temporary, stability compounds. And compounding stability is what creates calm success, sustainable money, and authority that doesn't need noise. So, in this first chapter, remember this. Before you improve your thinking, improve your position. Before you chase more, learn to hold what you already have, because the body is not an obstacle to success, it is the foundation of it. And what we build next will rest on how solid that foundation becomes.
Chapter 2. Stillness Before Strength. The modern world worships movement. More action, more speed, more output. If you are still, you are seen as lazy. If you pause, you are falling behind. If you slow down, you are losing. But nature does not work this way. Nothing strong begins with movement. It begins with stillness. A building does not rise from activity. It rises from a foundation that does not move. A tree does not grow tall because it expands upward quickly. It grows tall because its roots remain stable underground. Yet in business, in money, in ambition, people try to grow without roots, and then they wonder why everything feels fragile. Stillness is not weakness. It is contained power. It is the ability to hold pressure without reacting. This is why people who cannot sit still also cannot wait. They cannot wait for the right deal. They cannot wait for long-term returns. They cannot wait for skills to compound. They chase momentum instead of mastery. Look at most working routines. Endless notifications, constant urgency, shallow focus. People mistake busyness for productivity. But activity without stillness is just noise. In business, noise creates bad decisions. In money, it creates impulsive spending. In life, it creates exhaustion disguised as ambition. Stillness trains something rare. The ability to pause between stimulus and response. This pause is where intelligence lives. The person who reacts immediately is controlled by circumstances. The person who can remain still for a moment longer controls outcomes. Think about money decisions. Most financial mistakes are not caused by lack of knowledge. They are caused by emotional urgency, fear, greed, comparison.
A nervous system that cannot tolerate stillness will always rush decisions. It will buy at peaks, sell at fear, overcommit, undervalue patience. Stillness is a financial skill. In leadership and business, the same rule applies. The most dangerous person in a room is not the quiet one, it is the reactive one. Clients feel it, teams sense it, markets punish it. A leader who cannot pause cannot see clearly. A founder who cannot sit with uncertainty will chase distractions instead of building depth. This is why physical stillness matters. When you train the body to remain unmoving without tension, the mind learns that pressure does not require panic. The breath slows, the system stabilizes, and from that, strength emerges naturally. Strength built on movement collapses. Strength built on stillness endures. This is true in training. It is true in wealth. It is true in life. Most people try to force productivity when what they need is containment. They leak energy through worry, overthinking, and constant checking. Then they ask why progress feels slow. Here is a practical truth. If you cannot sit still for 10 minutes without reaching for stimulation, you will struggle to build long-term wealth, maintain consistent routines, lead under pressure, think strategically, because all of these require tolerance for stillness. This is why some people seem naturally disciplined. They are not. They are regulated. They can sit with boredom, with uncertainty, with delayed reward. This is the hidden skill behind compound success. Stillness also reveals something uncomfortable. When movement stops, avoidance disappears. You begin to notice restlessness, impatience, internal resistance. Most people escape this by staying busy, but growth requires facing it. This is why stillness feels difficult at first, not because it is hard, but because it is honest. In your daily routine, this principle changes everything. Instead of forcing productivity, you begin by stabilizing the system. You start your day grounded, not rushed. You work in blocks, not chaos. You stop chasing intensity and build consistency. Money stops feeling urgent. Goals stop feeling heavy, because your foundation can now support pressure. As we continue, remember this. Before power, there must be stillness. Before expansion, containment. Before success, stability. This is not a slowdown, it is preparation. And what comes next is strength that does not break under growth.
Chapter 3. Posture shapes the mind. Most people believe their confidence comes from their thoughts. They think, if I think differently, I'll feel stronger. If I change my mindset, my presence will change. But the body works in the opposite direction. Your posture speaks to your mind before your thoughts do. Long before you decide how you feel, your body has already decided for you. Posture is not about standing straight. It is about how you relate to gravity. Do you collapse under it, or do you organize yourself within it? This relationship shapes your internal dialogue. A collapsed body sends a silent message: reduce yourself, stay small, conserve. An aligned body sends a different one. You can occupy space. You can stay present. This is not psychology, it is physiology. Your nervous system reads posture as information. When the spine collapses, breathing shortens, circulation shifts, attention narrows.
The mind then follows that signal. This is why people feel less confident without knowing why. Nothing happened mentally. Something happened structurally. Look at how people sit during work. Rounded shoulders, head forward, compressed chest. This is not neutral. It is a posture of defense. And when you spend hours in defense, your decisions become defensive. You avoid risk. You hesitate. You overthink. Not because you are incapable, but because your body is signaling threat. Now think about business meetings, negotiations, interviews, leadership moments. People often focus on what to say, but the room responds before words arrive. It responds to presence. Presence is posture expressed over time. A person who occupies their body fully feels stable to others. They don't rush. They don't fidget. They don't over-explain. This is read as competence. Money decisions follow the same pattern. A collapsed posture often accompanies scarcity thinking, urgency, fear of loss, short-term choices. An organized posture supports long-term thinking. You pause before acting. You tolerate uncertainty. You don't chase every opportunity, not because you are passive, but because you are grounded. This is why posture is trained first in serious systems of mastery, because it creates internal hierarchy. The body learns where to place effort. The mind learns where to rest. Without posture, discipline becomes mental force. With posture, discipline becomes natural. Notice something subtle. People who are constantly motivating themselves often have poor posture. Their energy leaks, so they compensate with intensity. People with stable posture rarely need motivation. They conserve energy. They direct it. This is the difference between burning fuel and managing it. In daily routine, posture changes productivity. When you sit organized, focus lasts longer, fatigue decreases, decisions slow down in a good way. Emotional reactions soften. You begin to work with your system, not against it. Posture also shapes identity, not in a symbolic way, in a literal one. Your body is the most repeated signal you send to yourself, hours every day. Over years, that signal becomes personality. This is why change feels hard. People try to change identity without changing posture. The old signal keeps repeating. Here is a practical reflection. Notice your posture when you procrastinate, when you feel unsure, when you avoid a decision, when you feel pressure around money. You will almost always find collapse. This is not coincidence. It is communication. As this audiobook continues, posture will become more than alignment. It will become a reference point, a way to reset under pressure, a way to stabilize before action, a way to reclaim presence without effort. Because when posture is organized, the mind has less work to do, and clarity emerges quietly. Remember this: confidence is not something you think into existence. It is something you stand into. And once the body understands that, everything downstream begins to change.
Chapter 4. Most people associate discipline with force, pushing harder, ignoring fatigue, overriding resistance. They believe that if they are not harsh with themselves, they will become weak. But force does not create discipline. It creates conflict. And conflict inside the system always ends in collapse. Violent discipline is loud. It relies on pressure, guilt, and urgency. It works for short bursts, then it breaks. This is why people swing between extremes, periods of intense effort, followed by long periods of exhaustion. They call this inconsistency, but it is actually self-violence. True discipline is quiet. It does not shout commands at the body. It listens. It adjusts structure instead of demanding obedience. This is not softness. It is intelligence. Think about how people approach work. They overload their schedule, ignore recovery, consume stimulants to compensate. Then they wonder why burnout arrives. Burnout is not caused by work. It is caused by uncontained effort. Effort without structure is destructive. The same applies to money. People try to force financial discipline, extreme saving, extreme hustling, extreme restriction. This creates resentment. Eventually, they rebel against their own rules, overspending, quitting, giving up. Not because discipline failed, but because it was applied violently. In stable systems, discipline is sustainable pressure, just enough to create growth, never enough to cause damage. This is how muscles grow. This is how businesses grow. This is how wealth compounds. Gradually, quietly, without drama. Violent discipline ignores signals. Fatigue, tension, resistance. These are not enemies. They are information. Ignoring them is not strength. It is negligence. Look at people who succeed long-term. They are not brutal with themselves. They are precise. They know when to push, when to stop, when to adjust. This precision allows them to stay consistent for years, not months. This chapter is not about lowering standards. It is about removing internal warfare. When effort and resistance fight, energy is wasted. When they cooperate, progress becomes natural. In daily routine, this changes everything. Instead of asking, "How hard can I push today?" you ask, "How can I organize my effort so it holds?" Work becomes calmer. Money decisions become steadier. Habits stop collapsing. Discipline without violence builds trust. Trust between mind and body. Once that trust exists, the body stops resisting, and what once required force begins to happen automatically. Remember this. The goal of discipline is not control. It is stability. And stability, once built, does not need motivation to survive.
Chapter 5. Breath is the bridge. Most people breathe, but very few use their breath. They treat it as something automatic, something irrelevant. Yet breath is the only system in the body that connects the conscious and the unconscious. It is the bridge between chaos and control. When pressure rises, breath changes first, before thoughts spiral, before emotions explode. Breath shortens, chest tightens, the body prepares for threat, and then the mind follows. This is why stress feels sudden. It is not. It was building in the breath long before awareness arrived. In modern life, breath is constantly compromised. Long hours sitting, constant stimulation, persistent urgency. People live in shallow breathing and wonder why anxiety feels normal. And anxious breath creates an anxious mind, not the other way around. Think about business pressure, deadlines, decisions, financial risk. Most mistakes happen under breath deprivation. People rush not because time is limited, but because their breath is. A restricted breath produces tunnel vision. It removes perspective. This is why calm people seem lucky. They are not. They are oxygenated. Their system remains open under pressure. This allows patience. Patience allows timing. Timing creates advantage. Money amplifies breathing patterns. Scarcity tightens breath. Abundance loosens it.
But here is the hidden truth. Breath creates the feeling of scarcity or abundance first. Two people can have the same income and live in completely different realities. One breathes in panic, the other breathes in control. The numbers are identical, the experience is not. This is why no financial strategy works when breath is chaotic. You cannot plan long-term when your body believes survival is at stake. The breath must feel safe before the mind can think clearly. Breath also trains emotional delay, the ability to feel pressure without acting immediately. This is one of the most valuable skills in life. In business, it prevents bad deals. In money, it prevents impulsive spending. In routine, it prevents burnout. Here is a simple observation. Watch someone under pressure. Their breath freezes, their shoulders rise, their chest tightens. Now watch someone composed. Breath is slow, movement is minimal, attention is stable. This is not personality, it is training. As you listen, begin to notice your own breath. Not to change it yet, just notice. Is it deep? Is it rushed? Is it held? This awareness alone starts restoring control. Breath is not about relaxation, it is about access. Access to choice. When breath is open, you can choose how to respond. When breath is tight, reaction chooses for you. In work routines, breath determines stamina. People burn out not from workload, but from breathing as if under constant threat. They never exit survival mode. This audiobook is about changing that baseline. As we move forward, breath will become a tool, not a ritual, not a belief, a practical mechanism for handling pressure, making clearer decisions, holding uncertainty, sustaining effort without collapse. Remember this, control does not arrive through thinking harder, it arrives through breathing better. And once the bridge is restored, the system begins to cooperate.
Chapter 6. Control without force. Most people believe control comes from pressure, from pushing outcomes, from dominating conversations, from forcing decisions. But force is not control. Force is anxiety disguised as authority. True control is quieter than that. Control without force means you are not in a hurry. You can wait, and the person who can wait already has leverage. In negotiation, impatience is visible. It shows in rushed speech, in excessive explanation, in the need to convince. The other side feels it immediately. They may not name it, but they respond to it. Impatience weakens position. A controlled negotiator behaves differently. They speak less, they pause longer, they allow silence to work. Silence is not empty, it creates pressure, and pressure reveals information. Most people fear silence in negotiation. They rush to fill it because their breath tightens, their body cannot tolerate the gap. So they talk, they concede, they weaken their own position. Not strategically, but physiologically. Control without force begins in the body. When breath remains open, you can sit inside uncertainty. You don't need to resolve tension immediately. This is where advantage lives. Think about pricing. The person who rushes to justify price loses authority. The person who states value calmly and waits shifts the dynamic. The decision moves to the other side. This is control. In business decisions, the same rule applies. People often overcommit because they fear losing opportunity. But opportunity that requires panic is usually misaligned. Control allows discernment. Force creates attachment. Money reveals this clearly. People who force wealth chase fast returns. They react to markets. They overtrade. They abandon plans. People with control accept slow accumulation.
They wait for clarity. They understand timing. Timing beats intensity. Control also means knowing when not to act. Most losses come from unnecessary action. Deals taken too early, investments made under pressure, agreements accepted out of fear. Control allows you to say, "not yet." This phrase alone saves fortunes. In negotiation, notice this. The calmer person sets the pace. The one who can breathe while the other tenses is already ahead. This is not manipulation, it is regulation. Force tries to dominate the situation. Control stabilizes the system. One creates resistance, the other invites cooperation. As you practice this, something changes. You stop chasing outcomes. You begin shaping environments. Your presence does more work than your arguments. Remember this principle. Anything you must force will eventually resist you. Anything you can hold calmly will align. This is true in deals, in money, in life.
Chapter 7. Energy flows where attention goes. Every system follows a simple rule. Energy flows where attention goes, not where intention goes, not where desire goes. Where attention stays, life follows. This is why attention is the most valuable currency of the modern world. More valuable than time, more valuable than money. Because money can be recovered, time cannot. But attention shapes both. The digital world is not designed to steal your time. It is designed to fragment your attention, because fragmented attention cannot build anything meaningful. It can only react. Think about a typical workday. You sit down to focus. A notification arrives. You check it quickly. Another follows, then another. You tell yourself it's nothing, but something subtle happened. Your energy scattered. Attention does not return instantly. It leaves residue. Each interruption leaves a trace of unfinished focus. By the end of the day, you are exhausted, but nothing substantial was built. This is not laziness. It is attention leakage. Digital platforms understand this deeply. They compete not for your money, but for your focus. Because once they own your attention, your energy follows automatically. This is why scrolling feels draining. You're spending energy without creating value. In business, this is catastrophic. Deep work creates leverage. Shallow activity creates noise. People who constantly check messages feel busy but remain replaceable. People who protect attention build rare skills. Rare skills attract money. Digital distraction also reshapes patience. When everything responds instantly, waiting feels painful. But wealth is slow. Mastery is slow. Trust is slow. A nervous system trained on instant feedback struggles with long-term rewards. This is why many people fail financially even when they work hard. Their attention never stays long enough for compounding to occur. They switch goals, switch strategies, switch identities. Nothing roots. Notice how often people reach for their phone during discomfort, boredom, uncertainty, difficulty. The phone becomes an escape hatch, but every escape weakens containment, and containment is required for focus. Attention also determines self-worth. When your focus is constantly pulled outward, you lose internal reference. Comparison increases, anxiety rises, direction blurs. Money becomes emotional instead of strategic. People who control attention experience a different reality. They choose where energy goes. They work in blocks. They rest intentionally. They consume selectively. This creates clarity. Clarity creates confidence. confidence attracts opportunity. This chapter is not about rejecting technology. It is about governing it. Attention without governance will always be exploited, and anything exploited loses power. As we continue, attention will become something you place, not something you lose. And once energy stops leaking, progress accelerates quietly.
Chapter 8. The Art of Containment. Most people believe their main problem is lack of energy. They say they are tired, unmotivated, burned out. But energy rarely disappears. It leaks. And one of the biggest leaks is social. Social energy drain is subtle. It doesn't look dramatic. It feels normal. Conversations that go nowhere. Explanations that change nothing. Interactions that leave you strangely empty. By the end of the day, nothing major happened, yet you feel depleted. Containment is the opposite of leakage. It is the ability to hold energy inside the system instead of dispersing it everywhere. This is not isolation. It is intelligence. Look at how people interact. They overshare plans. They seek validation. They explain decisions to people who have no authority over their lives. Each explanation costs energy. Each unnecessary conversation pulls focus outward. In business, this is expensive. People discuss ideas endlessly instead of building quietly. They talk more than they execute. The moment energy turns into words prematurely, it loses momentum. This is why serious builders are often private, not secretive, contained. They choose when to speak and when to remain silent. Silence protects energy. Social environments shape containment. Some rooms drain you, others stabilize you. Pay attention. After certain interactions, you feel scattered. After others, you feel clearer. This is not coincidence. It is energetic feedback. Money is especially sensitive to social leakage. Talking about income, comparing lifestyles, justifying financial choices. All of this creates pressure. Pressure creates distortion. People overspend socially. They upgrade prematurely. They chase appearances. Not because they want to, but because containment collapsed. One of the most powerful skills you can develop is selective openness. Not everyone deserves access to your process. Sharing less often accelerates progress. Notice how often people say, "I don't know why I'm tired." Then look at their day. Back-to-back messages, endless social interactions, constant responsiveness. They are never fully inside themselves. Containment requires boundaries, not walls. Boundaries are permeable and intentional. In work environments, this looks like fewer but clearer conversations, less explaining, more delivering, saying no without guilt, protecting focus blocks. This creates respect, and respect preserves energy. In relationships, containment prevents resentment. When you constantly give attention without regulation, you drain. When you give intentionally, you nourish. This applies to friendships, family, and colleagues. Containment also changes how you listen. You stop absorbing emotional chaos. You hear without carrying. This preserves clarity. As you practice containment, something shifts. You feel calmer, less reactive, more grounded. Not because life became easier, but because less energy leaks. Remember this. You do not need more energy. You need fewer leaks. And as containment strengthens, everything you build gains weight, depth, and direction. Chapter 9. The Power of Inner Locks. Most people misunderstand self-control. They believe control means suppression, resisting desire, fighting urges, saying no through force. But suppression always rebounds. What is pushed down eventually pushes back harder. True control works differently. It does not block energy, it redirects it. This is where the idea of inner locks becomes important. An inner lock is not tension, it is containment with awareness. You do not eliminate desire, you stabilize it. Compulsive consumption is not about need, it is about leakage. People buy not because they want the item, but because something inside is uncontained. Boredom, anxiety, emptiness, comparison. Money becomes a regulator for emotion. This is why people scroll, shop, and spend even when they know better. Knowledge is present, control is not. Because control does not live in the mind, it lives in the system. Notice how compulsive spending feels. There is an urgency, a tightening in the chest, a rush. That rush is not pleasure, it is relief. Relief from internal pressure. Once the pressure returns, the cycle repeats. Inner locks interrupt this cycle. They create a pause between impulse and action. This pause is everything. It allows choice to re-enter. In financial behavior, this pause separates wealth from struggle. People who lack it live reactively. They spend to soothe. They invest emotionally. They avoid looking at numbers. People with inner locks can face discomfort without escaping it. They can delay gratification. They can wait. This is why budgeting fails for many. Not because the numbers are wrong, but because the system cannot tolerate restraint. Restraint feels like deprivation when energy is uncontained. When containment exists, restraint feels natural. Inner locks are trained gradually, not by denying pleasure, but by strengthening presence. You learn to feel desire fully without immediately satisfying it. This builds capacity. Capacity creates freedom. In money, this shows up as fewer impulsive purchases, clearer spending priorities, calm investing decisions, reduced financial anxiety. Not because income changed, but because control deepened. Consumer culture profits from unlocked systems. It teaches you to discharge tension instantly. Buy, click, consume. Inner locks break this spell. They restore sovereignty. The person with strong inner locks is not rigid. They are selective. They enjoy when they choose to. They abstain when they choose to. Choice replaces compulsion. As this chapter settles, remember, desire is not the enemy. Uncontained desire is. And when containment strengthens, money stops controlling emotion. Emotion stops controlling decisions, and control finally returns to where it belongs.
Chapter 10. The Sound Beneath the Noise. Most people think silence means nothing is happening. But real silence is not empty, it is full. Full of information, full of clarity, full of direction. What most people experience daily is not thinking, it is noise. Unfinished thoughts, replayed conversations, imagined futures, regretted pasts. The mind spins not because it is productive, but because it has no anchor. Noise creates urgency. Urgency creates poor decisions. This is why people act quickly and regret slowly. They confuse mental activity with intelligence. There is a sound beneath this noise, not an audible one, a quieter signal. It appears when the system stabilizes, when breath slows, when posture holds, when attention stops scattering. This is why clarity often arrives not when you search for it, but when you stop chasing it. In the shower, on a walk, in moments of pause. Noise drops, signal rises. In business, this distinction is everything. Most bad decisions are made in noise. Overthinking, second-guessing, external opinions flooding the system. The louder the noise, the less you can hear what matters. Silence does not make decisions for you. It reveals them. It removes distortion. It strips away emotional static. What remains is surprisingly simple. This is why experienced investors, leaders, and builders value solitude. Not because they dislike people, but because clarity needs space. Space to surface. Noise also creates false problems. When the mind is overstimulated, everything feels urgent. But when silence returns, most problems dissolve on their own. They were never real, they were reactions. Financial anxiety feeds on noise, constant checking, comparing, forecasting every possible outcome. This drains trust. Silence restores proportion. You begin to see what actually matters. Silence also improves timing. You stop acting from impulse, you start acting from alignment. This is where fewer actions create better results. Here is a subtle truth. A noisy mind wants certainty. A silent mind tolerates uncertainty. And tolerance for uncertainty is a competitive advantage. In markets, in relationships, in life. This chapter is not asking you to escape thought. It is inviting you to listen beneath it. To notice the moment when thinking softens. That moment holds direction. As we move forward, silence will not be an absence, it will be a reference. A place you return to before acting, before speaking, before deciding. Remember this, the loudest voice in your mind is rarely the wisest. Wisdom speaks quietly. And once you learn how to hear it, noise loses its authority.
Chapter 11. One-pointed mind. The modern mind is trained to divide itself. Multiple tabs, multiple goals, multiple identities. People call this efficiency, but division is not efficiency. It is dilution. A scattered mind feels busy, but produces little. A focused mind feels slow, but creates impact. This is the paradox most people miss. One-pointed focus does not mean obsession. It means direction without leakage. Your energy moves forward instead of sideways. Multitasking is celebrated because it looks impressive, but nothing meaningful is built in fragments. Depth requires continuity, and continuity requires focus. Look at how value is created in the world. Great businesses, strong skills, real wealth. None of them were built by divided attention. They were built by people who stayed with one thing long enough for it to mature. A distracted mind constantly restarts. New ideas, new strategies, new plans. Nothing compounds. Everything resets. This creates the illusion of movement without progress. Money responds strongly to focus. Scattered focus creates scattered income. People chase multiple streams before mastering one. They diversify confusion instead of building a stable base. A one-pointed mind does the opposite. It simplifies. It chooses fewer inputs, fewer goals, fewer directions, but it commits fully. This commitment allows momentum to build. Focus also changes effort. When attention is divided, work feels heavy. When attention is unified, work feels lighter, not because it is easier, but because resistance decreases. This is why people with deep focus can work fewer hours and produce more value. They are not rushing, they are aligned. Distraction trains impatience. Focus trains endurance. Endurance creates trust. Trust attracts opportunity. In daily routine, one-pointed focus looks like working in clear blocks, completing before switching, reducing input during output, and letting boredom pass without escape. These are not productivity hacks. They are neurological training. A focused mind also regulates emotion. It is harder to feel anxious when attention is stable. Anxiety thrives on scattered awareness. This is why meditation traditions always emphasize one object, not to limit the mind, but to strengthen it. A mind that can stay is a mind that can build. As you integrate this, notice resistance, the urge to check, the urge to switch, the urge to escape. These urges are not commands. They are habits, and habits can be retrained. Remember this: the future does not belong to the fastest thinkers. It belongs to those who can stay with one thing long enough to finish it.
Chapter 12. Effortless Control. In the beginning, control feels heavy. You think about every action. You monitor every choice. You apply effort deliberately. This stage is necessary, but it is not the destination. True mastery is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not require constant attention. It operates automatically. This is what effortless control means. Look at elite athletes. When they first learn a skill, movement is rigid. They overthink. They tense. But after years of repetition, control disappears into the body. They don't decide to react. They respond. This is not talent. It is integration. Effort has been absorbed. The same pattern appears in business. Early entrepreneurs micromanage everything. Every decision costs energy. Over time, systems replace effort. Routines replace motivation. What once felt exhausting becomes natural. Effortless control is not laziness, it is economy. Energy is no longer wasted on constant self-regulation. This frees attention for strategy. Notice how experienced professionals behave. They appear calm under pressure, not because they care less, but because the system is trained. Panic was replaced with pattern. In money, effortless control is visible. People stop checking balances compulsively. They stop reacting emotionally to fluctuations. They trust process. This trust is built through repetition, not belief. Athletes train fundamentals endlessly. Business leaders do the same. They don't rely on inspiration. They rely on structure. Structure creates reliability. Reliability creates freedom. This is why habits matter more than motivation. Motivation fluctuates. Habits stabilize. Effortless control emerges when habits carry the load. At this stage, discipline feels gentle, not because standards dropped, but because resistance faded. The system learned cooperation. Here is a key insight. If control feels exhausting, it has not integrated yet. Integration feels light. As this audiobook progresses, everything we built leads here. Stillness, posture, breath, focus. They converge into automatic regulation. Remember this: effort is a phase. Control is a skill. Mastery is when the skill no longer demands effort.
Chapter 13. When Practice Becomes Identity. In the beginning, practice feels external. Something you do, something you remember, something you force yourself into. There is effort, there is resistance, there is negotiation. But this stage is temporary. True transformation occurs when practice disappears as an action and reappears as identity. You no longer ask, "Should I do this?" You ask nothing. You simply act. Identity is the deepest layer of behavior. It does not argue. It does not hesitate. It expresses itself naturally. This is why most change fails. People try to act against identity instead of reshaping it. You can force behavior for a while. You cannot force identity. Identity must shift quietly, through repetition, through alignment, through internal consistency. When practice becomes identity, discipline dissolves, not because structure vanished, but because conflict ended. There is no longer a you trying to control yourself. There is coherence. This is the difference between "I try to be disciplined" and "I am disciplined." Between "I manage my money" and "I am someone who handles resources wisely." One requires effort. The other expresses itself. At this level, choices simplify. You no longer debate every decision. You already know what aligns and what doesn't. This saves enormous energy. Identity also shapes time perception. You stop chasing. You start building. Urgency dissolves. Direction remains. As you listen, reflect gently, not on what you do, but on what you are becoming, because everything downstream flows from that. This chapter marks a threshold, beyond effort, beyond technique, into being. And once you cross it, there is no need to go back.
Chapter 14. The State Beyond Struggle. Most people believe struggle is necessary, that without pressure, they will become lazy, that without fear, they will lose direction. But struggle is not a requirement. It is a phase. Struggle exists when parts of you are misaligned. Desire pulling one way, fear pulling another, identity lagging behind behavior. This friction feels like effort. Beyond struggle lies coherence, when direction, capacity, and identity align. Action no longer feels heavy, not because life became easier, but because resistance dissolved. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. Freedom is not needing to react. This distinction changes everything. In money, struggles shows up as tension, chasing income, fearing loss, comparing constantly. Money becomes emotional weight, not a tool. Beyond struggle, money regains neutrality. It becomes a resource, something you manage calmly. You are no longer pulled by it or pushed by it. This is financial freedom at its core, not numbers, regulation. People often think financial freedom means escape, no work, no responsibility. But true freedom is internal. It is the ability to engage without attachment.
This is why some people earn a lot and still feel trapped, and others earn modestly and feel sovereign. The difference is not income, it is internal pressure. Beyond struggle, decisions simplify. You don't need to justify every choice. You don't negotiate with fear. You act from clarity. This creates confidence others feel. This state also changes ambition. You still grow, but growth is no longer compensatory. You are not proving anything. You are expressing alignment. Money decisions become slower and better. You wait. You observe. You invest when it feels clean, not urgent, not emotional. Clean. This is the power of internal freedom. It removes distortion. It allows you to see what is enough and what is excess. Struggle-based success is loud. It demands recognition. Freedom-based success is quiet. It compounds unnoticed. As this chapter settles, recognize this. Peace is not the absence of ambition. It is ambition without anxiety. And once struggle ends internally, life begins responding differently.
Chapter 15. Living from the Inside Out. For most of their lives, people try to change the outside first. More money, better circumstances, different environments. They believe that once the outside improves, the inside will follow. But you now know better. Everything real moves from the inside out. Not from force, not from urgency, from alignment. When the inside is stable, the outside reorganizes naturally. Decisions become clearer, relationships become cleaner, money becomes calmer. Not because life stopped being challenging, but because you stopped being divided. You no longer need to chase confidence. Your posture carries it. You no longer need to force discipline. Your structure supports it. You no longer need to control every outcome. Your presence shapes them. This is what it means to live from the inside out. Life stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like a dialogue. You respond instead of react. In money, this creates something rare, enoughness. Not complacency, not limitation, but clarity. You know what matters. You know what to grow. You know what to ignore. This saves energy, and energy compounds. In work, effort becomes cleaner. You do less, but what you do carries weight. You choose depth over noise, and depth builds value quietly. In relationships, you stop leaking yourself. You give when it nourishes. You step back when it drains. Boundaries no longer feel like walls. They feel like self-respect. This path is not dramatic. It does not announce itself, but it is permanent. If there is one thing to remember from this journey, let it be this. You do not need to become someone else. You need to organize what is already here. Growth is not about adding more. It is about removing distortion. And once distortion clears, direction reveals itself. You may revisit these chapters, not to learn something new, but to remember something essential. Because real transformation is quiet, but once it settles, it never leaves.